Hi all, this is Mihao from Airhead, and today we'll go through a couple questions from the topic of operational procedures or OPS for the ATPL theory. So without any further ado, let's jump into the questions, talk about the explanations, the answers, and delve a bit deeper into the whys and the general topics from the subject. So question number one. Following a decompression at flight level 320, which should be the first steps? Inform ATC about descending, start descent, and don the mask. So, of course, when the decompression happens at such high altitude, the pilots will have a couple to 20, 30 seconds of useful consciousness. So, the time of useful consciousness before they will be incapacitated and unable to continue the flight. So the priority is always to don them oxygen masks, which for the crew are pressurized, and then continue with the flight and follow the standard for the any emergency really, which is aviate, navigate, and communicate. In case of descents from such low altitudes, after donning the masks, the captain of course should inform the ATC as the main threat has been averted. However, you quickly need to start descending to altitude of 10,000 feet or the lowest available altitude on the airway. Of course, remember for these for these questions, that in general, flights are permitted to fly up to 10,000 feet altitude without oxygen. If you are flying above 10,000 feet but below 13,000, you can do so with no oxygen for a maximum of 30 minutes. Any flight that goes above 13,000 feet needs to be equipped with oxygen. So in this case, the correct answer will be three at first for sure. So there's only one answer possible, which helps us with the rest. Also, for these questions, remember that the oxygen system used in the airliners most popularly is the chemical oxygen system. So we have chemically generated oxygen, which lasts around 15 minutes. And once it starts, it cannot be stopped. Also, for these type of questions, remember about the decompression sickness that can happen. Um, if there is a rapid decompression, this can lead to burst eardrums, expanded body gases, and in some extreme cases, it can even go as far as the bends, which is a tingling sensation in your joints, and hence caused by the nitrogen starting to bubble. And this is predominantly um, seen in case of decompressions after scuba diving, for example, shortly before the flight. Okay. And now going to question number two. Which of the following areas are more likely to attract flocks of birds? So for these questions, remember, general rule of thumb is that birds are looking for food and don't like noise. Um, in this case, garbage dumps are always a source of food for these animals. So this is something to be kept in mind. Also, secondly, remember that bodies of water in this type of questions will 99% of the time be the correct answer, and for very good reasons, as these attract the birds because of an abundance of fish, so food, and also a large empty areas. Power plants and motorways, they generate a lot of noise, so birds and frankly most animals try to avoid it. In case there is an airport positioned closely to such a place, like for example Amsterdam Schiphol, then there will be a periodic maintenance crews going around the areas and scaring the birds off, and this will be always communicated in the NOTAMs. So the areas that attract birds will be garbage dumps, ponds, and lakes. So always bodies of water and always open free spaces with abundance of food, um, or where the birds can find such food. So also open fields, or haystacks, or farms, etc. So in this case, 1 and 3 will be correct. When can a pilot who does not have a valid low visibility operation certificate fly? So landings without the low visibility operation certificate, are permitted to be flown to up to category 1 minima. Cut 1 is not a low visibility operation. However, all the following are. So for landing, this is 550 meters in terms of RVR and 200 feet decision altitude. When it comes to takeoff, and this will be always found on the plates of the airport that you're departing from, the low visibility operations start below 550 RVR. However, a pilot may take off with RVR up to 400 meters without a certificate. So this is something to remember, as this can be slightly tricky. Also remember that in most cases, if you're departing from an aerodrome with such low RVR, it is very possible that if there is no precision approach available at the airport, the minima for landing may be much higher than 400 meters. In that case, you need to nominate a different departure alternate aerodrome. So keep that in mind for these questions. Landing, that is my mistake. But like I said correctly, yes, landing 550 and takeoff 400. So that is my mistake. But yes, however, that's what we discussed. Can the approach and landing be continued below the minimum descent altitude if the VOR DME approach, if during the VOR DME approach, the pilot can distinctly see and identify the approach lights? So yes, the approach lights are considered adequate visual aids when commencing an approach in order to continue the approach. But remember, you have to consider that these visual cues need to be maintained throughout the entire approach below the MDA. If, in any case, you lose these visual cues, the approach has to be discontinued immediately and the missed approach needs to be commenced. So the approach can be continued and the lights are adequate in this particular case. Computer provides a visual mess maintained. Yes, so you need to maintain it throughout the entire final segment. Now, question number 5. An airplane is scheduled to perform a short flight where the maximum planned altitude is 260, flight level 260. During flight preparations, it becomes apparent that the airplane is not RVSM compliant due to technical malfunction that has been deferred to the minimum equipment list. What, if any, altitude restrictions apply for the flight? So if the airplane is not RVSM compliant, of course, it cannot fly in the reduced vertical separation minima airspace. Remember that the RVSM starts from 200, flight level 290 to flight level 410. So in this case, the airplane actually will not operate in the RVSM airspace. RVSM allows aircraft to fly with a vertical separation of 1,000 feet rather than the standard 2,000 feet if they are approved. However, in this case, the RVSM starts at 290 flight level. So the airplane will operate below the RVSM airspace. So keep that in mind. Also remember for these questions, as these can show up on the exams, that when you plan to fly in the RVSM, besides having at least one means of automatic altitude holding, you also need to have altimeters, two altimeters that are plus minus 75 feet discrepancy between each other on the ground. Otherwise, you cannot fly in these airspaces. And the last question for today, a minimum obstacle clearance altitude MOCA is defined as 8,300 feet. The maximum terrain or obstacle at the area of applicability of this MOCA is. So for these questions, I recommend you to study all the altitudes, IFR altitudes, as there is MORA, MOCA, Grid MORA, MEA, MSA, MAA, and quite a few more, because these will show up in the exams and in different subjects as well, in flight planning, and ops, and you can also see them in airlaw. However, remember that the MOCA gives you 1,000 feet obstacle clearance in non-mountainous areas, so below 6,000 feet, and 2,000 feet obstacle clearance in mountainous areas. So in this case, if MOCA is defined at 8,300, that means that it's giving us 2,000 feet obstacle clearance above the highest obstacle, which will be 6,300. Meaning the maximum terrain obstacle will be 6,300 or less, but above 6,000 feet. Because if it was below 6,000 feet, then the MOCA would be defined as only 1,000 feet extra. And that's it for today. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best with the study.